Welcome to another Priest Guide, where today's focus is on Shadow Priests. Shadow Priest as a class focuses on dealing damage with numerous damage spells. Our main priority as a Shadow Priest is to maintain damage over time, or dots, debuffs on our target. We as Shadow Priests excel above most other classes when facing multiple high health targets at once, as we will ramp up our damage beyond other classes, making us one of the strongest and sought after class in Cataclysm. Now that we have covered a small introduction about Shadow Priests, let us discuss which race to choose and why. If you are an Alliance player, then your options are either humans or Worgans, because humans have the Spirit Racial, which increases your spirit by 3%, and Worgans because they have the Viciousness and Darkflight racials. If you are a Horde player, then your options are Trolls or Goblins, because Trolls have the Berserker racial, which increases your casting speed by 20% for 10 seconds, and Goblins have the Time is Money racial, which increases your casting speed by 1%. In World of Warcraft, we have a chance to pick two professions. These professions provide us with additional benefits, giving us a much-needed edge. Our best choice for professions are engineering and tailoring because of the benefits they give. Engineering provides us with the Synapse Springs, the Grounded Plasma Shield, and the Nitro Boosts, while tailoring enables us to craft the Light Weave embroidery. Now let's discuss what add-ons and macros are. Add-ons are collections of codes that augment, modify, or replace your World of Warcraft's default UI. As a Shadow Priest, we have a variety of add-ons we can choose from, but my recommendations are Weak Auras, Details, Deadly Boss Mods, Questy, Leatrix Plus, and Elv UI. While macros are used to assist you in performing more than one action at a time to accomplish a task more quickly and easily. The best macros for Shadow Priest are the Mouseover macro and the Cancel Dispersion macro, as shown in the description here. Now let's talk stat priority. Our number one stat should be Intellect, because Intellect gives us spell power, mana, and it increases the chance of our spells to crit. The second stat should be Spirit or Hit, and we should strive to reach 17% hit cap. I know you might be wondering why we can use Spirit. Well, the answer lies in the Twisted Faith talent, which grants us spell hit rating equal to 100% of our Spirit. After Intellect and Hit, we go for Haste, specifically up to our soft cap. Haste allows our dot spells to generate an additional tick damage. Our fourth stat is Mastery, because it increases the damage done by our Shadow Orbs. And finally, our least attractive stat is Critical Strike. Now that we have covered our stat priority, let's take a look at what talents we're going to be taking. All of our talents will go into Shadow Tree, while the remaining will go into our Discipline Tree. For Tier 1, we will start by choosing Darkness, Improved Shadow Word Pain, and Veiled Shadows. For Tier 2, we will choose Improved Mind Blast, Improved Devouring Plague, and Twisted Faith. For Tier 3, we will choose Shadow Form, Phantasm, and Harnessed Shadows. For Tier 4, we will choose Vampiric Embrace, Masochism, and Mind Melt. For Tier 5, we will choose Pain and Suffering, and Vampiric Touch. For Tier 6, we will choose Sin and Punishment, and Shadowy Apparition. For Tier 7, we will choose Dispersion. We will add the remaining talent points in Twin Disciplines and Mental Agility for Tier 1, Evangelism and Archangel for Tier 2. This is how our talent tree will look like after you have added all the talent points. For glyphs, we should choose Glyph of Shadow Word Pain, Glyph of Mind Flay, and Glyph of Shadow Word Death as prime glyphs, Glyph of Spirit Tap, Glyph of Mass Dispel, and Glyph of Fade. For our major glyphs, finally Glyph of Fading, Glyph of Shadow Fiend, and Glyph of Levitate for our minor glyphs. As for enchants, the options for each item slot are as follows. Arcanum of Hyjal for the head slot, Fellfire Inscription or Greater Inscription of Charged Lodestone for the shoulder slot, Lightweave Embroidery or Enchant Cloak of Greater Intellect for the back, Enchant Chest of Peerless Stats for our chest piece, Draconic Embossment of Intellect or Enchant Bracer of Mighty Intellect for our wrist slot, Enchant Gloves of Haste or Enchant Gloves of Greater Mastery for the hand slot, Ebon Steel Belt Buckle for the waist slot, Sanctified Spell Thread or Powerful Ghostly Spell Thread for the legs, Enchant Boots of Lava Walker for the feet, Enchant Ring of Intellect, which is only applicable if you have enchanting as a profession, Enchant Weapon of Power Torrent for the two-handed weapon. And if you have an offhand, then your choice is the Enchant Offhand of Superior Intellect. As for gems, we will use the Burning Shadow Spirit Diamond for the meta gem, the Brilliant Inferno Ruby for the red gem, the Reckless Ember Topaz for yellow gem, and finally the Purified Demon's Eye for the blue gem. If you have jewel crafting, you can make the Brilliant Chimera's Eye, and you can make the Quick Cogwheel or Sparkling Cogwheel if you have engineering. For consumables, our options are Fortune Cookie, Seafood Magnifique, or Severed Sagefish Head. As for flasks and potions, we will use the Flask of the Draconic Mind and the Volcanic Potion. Let's cover a small brief of our spells, cooldowns, and abilities. As Shadow Priests, we have a wide arsenal of spells available to us. Knowing our important spells and when they are best suited to be used is a key part of performing well in any environment. This section aims to show our most important spells by category and give us a brief example of what each spell does. Let us start with Mind Flay, which deals damage every second for 3 seconds. Mind Spike, which deals split Shadow Frost damage to the target, but removes all of your damage over time debuffs. Shadow Word Pain, which deals high damage over time. Vampiric Touch, which deals moderate damage over time and grants up to 10 group members replenishment whenever you deal damage with Mind Blast while Vampiric Touch is applied to the target. Next we have Devouring Plague, which deals great damage and heals us for 15% of the damage it has dealt. Then Mind Blast, which deals high damage to the target after a short cast, and Mind Sear, which channels into a target, dealing damage to all enemies. As well as Shadow Word Death, which instantly deals moderate damage to the target, tripled against enemies below 25% health, and deals the same damage back to you if the target does not die from it. Shadow Word Death is buffed by 2 of our talents. Masochism, which will restore 10% of our maximum mana whenever we take damage, and from Mind Melt, which further increases the damage of Shadow Word Death by 30% to targets below 25% health. Now for our cooldowns. As Shadow Priest, we have limited cooldowns available to us, starting with Archangel, which consumes all stacks granted by Evangelism to give us 5% of our mana back and to increase the damage we do by our Mind Flay, Mind Spike, Mind Blast, and Shadow Word Death by 4% per stack. This buff is called Dark Archangel and it lasts for 18 seconds. Dispersion, which reduces the damage taken by 90% and restores 36% of our mana. This talent has a 2-minute cooldown. Shadow Fiend, where we summon a pet that deals decent damage and restores 3% of your maximum mana every time it attacks. Our Shadow Fiend has a 5-minute cooldown, but this cooldown is reduced by 1 minute because of the Veiled Shadows talent. Then we have Divine Hymn, which is a major area of effect or AoE, healing cooldown that has an 8-minute cooldown. Finally, we have Hymn of Hope, which restores 2% mana to us and 3 nearby allies, and it has a 6-minute cooldown. For our utility spells, we have Leap of Faith, which pulls the target ally towards your location. Dispel Magic, which can remove 1 magical buff from an enemy, or 2 magic debuffs from yourself or an ally. Mass Dispel, which is an AoE version of Dispel Magic. This spell removes 1 magical debuff from 10 friendly targets, and 1 magical buff from 10 enemy targets. Cure Disease, which removes 1 disease from an ally. Fear Ward, which makes a friendly target immune to the first fear used against them. Levitate, which allows us to float above the ground, water, and greatly reduce our falling speed. Shackle Undead, which as the name states it, shackles an undead enemy in place. Fade, which temporarily reduces our threat to 0. And lastly, Mind Soothe, which reduces the aggro range of a humanoid or dragonkin mob. As for our buffs, we have Mind Quickening, which increases all group members' spell haste by 5% while you are in shadow form. This buff does not stack with other similar buffs. Vampiric Embrace, which heals us for 6% of the damage we deal and heals nearby party members for 3% of the damage that has been dealt. Inner Fire, which is a personal buff and it increases our armor and spell power. This buff can be improved by the Inner Sanctum talent, adding 6% reduced spell damage taken. Inner Will is another personal buff that increases our movement speed by 10% and reduces the mana cost of instant cast spells by 15%. This buff can also be improved by picking the Inner Sanctum talent, adding 6% additional movement speed. Inner Sanctum talent, which as stated before, adds 6% additional movement speed. Power Word Fortitude, which buffs all nearby party and raid members, increasing their stamina for 1 hour. Shadow Protection, which also buffs all nearby party and raid members, increasing their shadow resistance for 1 hour. In addition to all the previously mentioned spells, priests have a few more spells with very niche uses that are worth mentioning to help us fully understand our entire spellbook. These spells are Mana Burn, which burns a portion of the target's mana. Mind Control, which allows us to take control of the mind of our target, controlling their movement and actions. Psychic Scream, which fears up to 5 nearby enemies for 8 seconds. Holy Nova, which deals damage to all nearby enemies and heals nearby party members without causing any threat. Resurrection, which simply resurrects one targeted player. Mass Resurrection, which resurrects all the group at once. And Mind Vision, which allows us to see through the point of view of our target. Now that we are at the end of the video, let me tell you about the Shadow Priest rotation on single targets and on multiple targets. For our single target rotation, we start with Mind Spike on pull, then we apply Shadow Word Pain. Afterwards, we will use Mind Flay until you get a Shadow Orbs proc. Once we have the proc, we will cast Mind Blast to consume the Shadow Orbs. Apply Vampiric Touch and Devouring Plague to the target at all times. For AoE rotation and when facing 2 to 4 targets, start with applying Shadow Word Pain on all targets and keep it refreshed with Mind Flay. Vampiric Touch and Devouring Plague should be applied on one target. Circle back to Mind Flay to refresh the duration of your Shadow Word Pain. Against 5 or more targets. Things are much simpler when fighting larger groups of enemies. Simply use Mind Sear on a target, ally, or enemy in the middle of the group to AoE them all down. Thank you for watching. Hit the subscribe and like buttons if you found the video helpful. Leave a comment of what you want me to work on next, and until next time, take care.